Call to order the July 17th meeting of the West Sacramento City Council Redevelopment Successor Agency and Financing Authority. We're going to begin tonight, as we do each week, with the Pledge of Allegiance. So we'd like to invite our guests to join the council and staff in the pledge, which tonight will be led by my colleague, Council Member Bill Christoph.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So the council did meet in closed session this evening to confer with our real property negotiator regarding the items, the parcel numbers listed in our closed session agenda, and with Garfield Traub, California, to confer with our legal counsel regarding two items of substantial exposure to litigation. No action was taken. To confer with our labor negotiator regarding negotiations with Local 39, and secondarily with department heads, management specialists, and professionals and confidential employees, and no action was taken. That brings us to item 1A, which is presentations by the public on matters not on the agenda but within the jurisdiction of the City Council. As is noted on our agenda, the City Council is prohibited by state law from having a discussion or taking action on any issues brought up under item 1A, but it is an important opportunity for a public forum. We ask that anybody that wishes to address the council on this item or any other item this evening to please fill out one of the yellow cards that's available near the front door and to turn it in to the city clerk. In front of the clerk is a timer that we use to make sure that everybody gets a chance to be heard. And so to that end, we ask that all comments be limited to 3 minutes, and the timer will show that. Also in front of the clerk is a flip chart, and that flip chart simply indicates which agenda item that we're currently considering. We take the yellow cards all the way up to the conclusion of the staff report, if there is one on an item. But once the public comments or the council discussion has begun, we don't take any additional cards. So if you have an intention to speak on any item tonight, be sure to turn the card in before the public testimony has begun and before the council question and discussion has occurred as well. We know that for some folks, speaking in public can cause some anxiety, so we do ask that there not be any boos or catcalls or even applause or other demonstrations in the chambers. We try to maintain a civil discourse here so that everyone gets a full opportunity for their voice to be heard. So with that, we have several requests to speak under item 1A, and the first is by Chris Rack.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Chris Rack, and I'm the president of Unite Here Local 49. We represent over 3,000 members in hospitality, and many of our members live right here in West Sacramento. We've been following the proposed hotel and conference center as well as other new development throughout the region. And we wanted to come here tonight to urge the council that for any future development, we urge you that any hospitality projects include a guarantee of labor peace to protect the investment by the city. We have a few members and friends who've joined us because they care about this issue. There's two paths when new hospitality jobs are created. They can create good jobs with living wages, health insurance, and retirement security, or minimum wage jobs that drain county and city programs. Our members have worked hard to ensure that they can secure the fair treatment they deserve and that they can afford to live, work, and reinvest in their community. We believe the Sheraton and the Citizen are shining examples of what can happen when the city, when the labor, and when the developers all work together to ensure that workers have a fair process to organize and to ensure that the city's investments are protected. We can commend this council for positioning yourselves really well for future development along the riverfront and making it a true destination for not just this region, but for visitors to our region. We just urge you to demand that labor peace guarantee from the developers be part of protecting that vision. We also want to say that we stand in solidarity with our brothers and sisters from the building trades. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you. Rick Davis.
My name is Rick Davis, and I'm the business manager for the Ironworkers, Local 118. I represent ironworkers from the Ceres to Oregon border, from Vacaville to the Elko County line in Nevada. And we're here to support any building that you do, and we'd like to do it for you.
All right, thank you. Cody Potter.
Good evening. How's it going, council members, mayor? My name's Cody Potter. This is my wife, Farouj, and my two kids here. I've been in West Sacramento since about 2007. We bought a house just down the street here close to Michigan and Laurel Lane. And we're here to also see West Sacramento thrive and make sure that any riverfront becomes beautiful and developed the way it can, but also in a way that supports the families that are here in West Sacramento and the surrounding areas, and to make sure that low-wage jobs without benefits aren't created in the community, and especially not with our tax dollars. So we're here to urge you to demand. We're here for labor peace, pretty much as condition of projects that you do go forth with. So that's it. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Todd Lawson.
Hello, my name is Todd Lawson. I'm with the Ironworkers Local 118, just a member. I'd like to stand here behind Rick, supporting Rick and the hall with the benefits of the attitude that would be presented with the education and training of the members of Ironworkers Local 118 and how they would be able to support your project. Thank you.
Thank you. Norma Alcala.
I want to say first hello to Oscar. We haven't seen you in a while. Chris Ledesma, the last time we saw you were at the freeway, and we were holding up signs, and you were campaigning, and we were campaigning. Of course, the mayor, I think you're a great mayor, and Bill Christoph, our postmaster, and Mark, glad to see you all, the best city council in the area. We're here to support the SEIU and the ironworkers in their request that you guys adopt this labor peace agreement. Norma and I we're all residents of West Sacramento. Norma and I are also officers, and Angelica are officers of the Chicano Latino Caucus of the California Democratic Party. We recently made 5,000 calls for candidates in Fresno and 13,000 overall for a person, Leticia Perez, running for Senate down there. You guys may be familiar with that. We're active in the area. This is the president of the River City Democratic Club and the former president of the River City Democratic Club. And he's never been president of the River City Democratic Club. Maybe next time. But he's with the CTA in the area. We need to have jobs that are living wage jobs. It's good that you're bringing in a hotel. We support you. We love our city council, everything you're doing to develop it. But follow through. Get us jobs that are going to allow our neighbors, our friends, to have living wages. That's just as important as bringing that hotel in here. It's something that we have to do. So we're here to support the SEIU and the ironworkers, and Lino's here. I think he's the president of the Iron Workers. Okay. And Kevin was here. He's here.
Oh, Kevin's over there.
From the Iron Workers, and they're our friends. And a lot of our neighbors are from these groups. So we urge you to really take this under consideration. It's a serious matter. It's not only for yourselves, it's for our neighbors. It's for our community. It's for West Sacramento. It'll make it stronger. It'll make it thrive. And it's the right thing to do. Please adopt this labor peace. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Bill Lowell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. William Lowell of West Sacramento for the record. I know you can't comment on it, but I'm curious as to what's the latest story on the new development that's going to take place between 3rd and 5th and West Capitol and G Street, I think it is. And also, I think, partly as a result of my personal experience, but I think more new homes should be built with a universal design, and such action would eliminate the need that I've been facing, and it would save a lot of people money, especially people living longer or who have injuries before they pass away that are cause them to rely on wheelchairs or other devices. And it's a good investment because it costs such a small portion to add that and factor it in. And I think we should also start requiring more public restrooms for businesses, as well as encourage more restrooms to be added onto the homes, since we don't have public restrooms like we did back 50 years ago. And so we should change with the times in a healthy way. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lowell. And Carl Pineo, or Pineo? Okay.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. Carl Pineo with Ironworkers Local 118. Ironworkers Local 118 believes that we should proceed with this project. I know there's still a lot of questions that need to be answered from the City Council members and the Mayor, but this would be a great project for everybody, for the region, especially when trying to put people back to work and with the high unemployment rate that we have. We all know that in Sacramento, Mayor Kevin Johnson would love to turn Sacramento into a metropolis. And with all the hotels coming that there's proposed over there with the arena deal, this would give West Sacramento a competing advantage to get ahead of them. What we'd also like to see is that there's no reason why between West Sacramento and Sacramento that we can't turn that the Riverwalk into an area like Portland has or San Antonio has. Heck, we're the capital of California, and basically what have we had here in the last few years? Kings came, almost 30 years ago, and now we have the River Cats, but what else has really been proposed or built in the West Sacramento and Sacramento area for the people of West Sac and Sacramento? So I think this would be a good step in the right direction to bring in a lot more things in and a lot more family atmosphere for people to enjoy on the weekends. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, those are all the requests we had to speak under item 1A. Just for Mr. Lowell's benefit with respect to the property on West Capitol Avenue between 3rd and 5th, the permits have been pulled and the building fees have been paid. We expect the groundbreaking on that project to be occurring soon. I think the date is being worked on, so the construction of the weeds will be gone, and the construction on that parcel we expect to commence shortly. The word has come from the project developer. On the hotel issue, obviously we have no agenda item tonight. I will simply say that kind of like Rayleigh Field, this is a project that is not done until it's done, and this one is not anywhere close to being wrapped in terms of a deal. This is a highly complex development project that the city has been undertaking with a lot of different partners. If you followed this story for a couple of years, you know we have dealt variously with the Korean Pension Fund, with the Bank of China, with the Bank of China, which wanted to denominate the deal in British pounds. We've dealt with a company in Australia, one in Texas. This is this would be the largest project we have ever done. And so it is. Every time we take a step forward, we take half a step back in order to deal with the dramatic complexity of putting a project of this scale together, because it is both a hotel and a conference center and the city's very first parking garage and apartments and condominiums on the riverfront for the first time ever in West Sacramento. So it's a very big and complicated project, which we will, if we are successful, we will be successful just barely by the skin of our teeth, and we're hopeful, we're optimistic. But until we're close, we're not close. And so I know there's some have viewed this project as being essentially finished, and now we just have to actually move to construction, and that might happen. If you were around for Rayleigh Field, when we finally finished the deal, which was midnight after the deal had fallen apart 6 or 7 times that same day, and then proceeded to fall apart again 16 times after that. Until we're actually moving dirt, it's hard to say that we will have a deal. So we're not going to start construction tomorrow, but we are working expeditiously. If we can make this project happen, we know we need to make it happen quickly, because the cost of construction and the cost of interest rates and everything else has been rising dramatically, and this project has to happen soon, or it may not happen. But let me add that the values that have been expressed here tonight around jobs that support working families in our community are a key priority for the council. we do have a high unemployment rate, but more than that, this is a community that is very close knit. A lot of families have been here for generations, and everyone in this community believes in growing an economy that supports and serves everyone in this community. And so every single member of the council has communicated through the discussions on this hotel project directly with the hotel developers about the importance of the issues that were raised this evening, and around the level of not just quality of the hotel, which will be first rate, but also the stewardship and the responsibility of that hotel to be a responsible employer in our community that contributes to economic prosperity for all of our citizens. And so we're working on that along with the financing and the interest rates and the construction and every other dimension of the project in order to try to deliver. Because if we can't build the hotel, there will be no construction jobs or hotel jobs. And so our first priority at the moment is to try to make sure that we have a project to be having this conversation about. But I do want to assure you that every single member of the council is committed to achieving that standard of labor quality and benefits and compensation at the hotel project if we're able to succeed in bringing it across the line. So that's as much as we can say about the project this evening. And thank you for being a part of this tonight. This could be going on for quite a bit longer. Yeah, so if you were only here for that topic tonight, we won't consider it rude if you were to leave now. You're welcome to stay. We have a lot of other exciting things to do, but we do know that some folks may not be here for those other issues. All right, so if we could, we're now going to return to our regular business and ask the folks who are on the way out to please hold the conversation so you've left the chamber doors. And we are going to proceed to item 1B, which is council communications. So are there any reports or other communications this evening? We'll start with Mr. Johannesson.
Yeah, thank you. The Yolo County Housing met on June 20th. We received some more bad news in terms of the effect of the sequestration. There's going to be a further reduction of staff, which is only going to exacerbate the housing situation in Yolo County. Also, we had a 10-year housing or homeless plan commission meeting, and we received some updated statistics on the homelessness, and we had a brief discussion about this, the last homeless discussion. But just on the last homeless count this year, about 92% of the homeless population were a combination of mentally ill and substance abuse people. So the vast majority of those folks are folks that have issues in terms of mental health or substance abuse. The Air Quality Management District Board met as well on July 10th. There again, there was a discussion on really the only significant most of the pollutants in this area are caused by mobile sources. Most of those mobile sources are based on transportation through the highways. So there's only so much the local district can do, but what they can do, for example, is land use, help with land use decisions, transportation planning, and also some of the farm equipment replacement program for the to go to cleaner burning engines. We also received an update on the asbestos program. One thing I did not know is that asbestos is not banned now. It's just that the uses are limited to whatever the uses were in 1989. So asbestos still continues to be used. The other thing we found is that the single-family residence reconstruction is not subject to any kind of surveys in terms of asbestos. So we had a good conversation about folks that are doing remodeling another time to be sure to use licensed contractors, because licensed contractors know how to deal with this stuff. And you've got a lot of homes now that are in existence that, for example, have blown asbestos on ceilings and in the walls. And so folks doing remodeling on their own would be exposed to that. So it is still a big issue. And those were the two updates that we received. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Mr. Johannesson. Mr. Villegas.
Just very quickly, Mr. Mayor, early this evening, the Port Commission met. For those who may not know, it was the very first time the Port Commission met under the new era where we're no longer actually trying to manage a port, but we are now a landlord with SSA Marine operating the northern terminal. It was very refreshing. I think it was a 10-minute meeting. 5 of it was because I had a long-winded question, so this new era certainly allows us to sort of focus our efforts more on city operations rather than trying to manage a port. And so the actual port business plan, the purpose of the item was to update us on the status of that, and all's well on that front.
Mr. Kristoff.
Yeah, very briefly, Mr. Mayor. West Sac SAFCA was supposed to meet last Thursday. We had a snafu with posting of the meeting and things, and one of the major items on it is putting properties on the tax roll. So we had to make sure we dotted every I and crossed every T. So we are going to have that meeting on Friday, this coming Friday at 10:30. So we'll see it posted, and we'll see what we can do. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Ledesma.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On July 1st, Monday, July 1st, there was a meeting of the Board of Directors of the Water Resources Association of Yolo County, where we adopted the West Side Integrated Regional Water Management Plan, and that passed unanimously. So that was about the only business we had at that meeting. This past Monday, there was a meeting of the Yolo County Habitat Natural Community Conservation Plan Joint Powers Agency Board. At that board meeting, we received, actually, it was completed on time, and in fact under budget, the first administrative draft of the Yolo County Habitat and CCP plan, some 2,000 pages long, but it was a proud moment for the board. As many know, we've been working the last year to get the JPA on firm financial footing, as well as get on a work plan to complete the plan, and we did it. And our executive director and project manager and all the staff deserve the credit. So we began to go through that plan, and I'm happy to say our staff was there. And in fact, we will be hearing that, I think, on the August 7th meeting here at Council. So I won't go too much more into it. However, we did meet last night. I did meet with our own Agricultural and Natural Resources Commission, who also heard the first hearing of the plan, and to get their feedback for that council meeting. So I thank them for their time last night. In addition, I should note that the JPA did receive, as announced last week, a $999,000 grant from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. It's the largest grant put out by the federal agency in America that we received. And that is a huge compliment and confidence booster for our JPA for the work we've done. And in fact, that will go a long way towards funding the entire third draft of the plan, which will be coming. We're already planning for the third draft. But again, we have some business to take care of on the 7th. So that's all for tonight on that subject. Thank you.
All right, I had a couple. The Delta Protection Commission met here at the end of last month, mainly for the purpose of appointing a new executive director, and we did do that, but I had to leave the meeting right as we did, so I haven't seen a public announcement, so maybe we're still negotiating compensation, but we did hire somebody. So hopefully we'll be able to, I know the name, they're Yolo County resident, but hopefully we'll be able to announce that, the new directors soon, so replacing Mike Machado, who's been our executive director for the last couple of years. I attended the annual business meeting of the U.S. Conference of Mayors in Las Vegas, Nevada last month, and a couple of the council is where I do a lot of work there on flood protection issues. We did the Conference of Mayors passed a resolution I had introduced on support for the reauthorization of the Water Resources Development Act in the form that Senator Boxer has proposed, and specifically calling out the issues on crediting that we care about, and the ability to authorize, despite the earmark ban, that Sacramento cares about, but that we will care about once we get to that stage as well. So that was, I co-sponsored that with the mayor of Tacoma. Also did some work on the Brownfields tax credit. We passed a new request on that, and on broadband access in places like here. And I wasn't going to mention it, but I did. But since she's here, I did do a resolution also on early learning in preschool with the mayor of Providence, Rhode Island, around federal support for high quality standards in preschool and early learning. Signed up for with Google for the Google program to do a local partnership to help more businesses in West Sacramento get their businesses online. It's surprisingly, I think a lot of folks are surprised that a majority of small businesses in this country do not have any internet presence whatsoever. Or they have an internet presence that's not very functional. It has nothing on it. So Google has launched a program to work with I think a couple hundred mayors across the country to try to do trainings and support and some infrastructure for local businesses, collaborating with local chambers to do that. So look for more of that work to occur in the fall. And then I met with Google and Apple and Code for America around the innovation and technology components of our council-adopted strategic plan, and followed up with the city manager and his team about how to proceed with that subsequently. And then finally, the board of directors of the Sacramento Area Council of Governments met at the end of last month, and we took up the blueprint issue that had been consuming so much energy and oxygen for several months. The board voted unanimously to reaffirm the commitment of SACOG to the blueprint and to the way in which it has been implemented, and to the involvement of the SACOG staff in providing, at the request of agencies as they have in the past, information about it. That it was unanimously voted, but also broad, public statements by the members of the board from throughout the whole region. Yuba Sutter, Placer, El Dorado, Corciolo, and Sacramento, which had been supporters all along. So that was a significant step. I believe that closes that issue, hopefully. Certainly from the regional perspective, it does. And we sort of instantly communicated that to the Corps and to Senator Feinstein's office and others who had been concerned about whether or not the regional commitment to the integrity of the blueprint, whether they could continue to rely on the blueprint in order to avoid more severe regulations on communities like ours. We were able to assure them that yes, they could. And then in addition to that, there's a pending issue that's coming through SACOG that I wanted to highlight. I've asked the city clerk to put it on the screen. SACOG functions, in addition to its planning role, as the region's Airport Land Use Commission. And there is and so each, every few years, every decade, we adopt a new airport land use plan. The purpose of the airport land use plan is to assure that jurisdictions don't put incompatible uses that would interfere with the operations of the airport around the airport. And because the airport is a regional facility and its impacts are regionally felt, and its airshed is regionally felt, that's not something that's reserved just to the County of Sacramento. Even though the County of Sacramento is the owner and operator of the airport, the Airport Land Use Commission includes all of the region's local governments together. The Airport Land Use Commission, as SACOG, doesn't have direct project authority in most cases, but the Airport Land Use Commission has to verify that local general plans are consistent with the Airport Land Use Plan, and the airport also has to comply. It does not give the region operational authority over the airport. It's purely a land use device. So the reason I'm highlighting this, that none of that is new, but what is new is that the draft Airport Land Use Commission plan that is now out for public comment and circulation significantly expands the what's called the airport influence area, and that's what you can see on here. On the left is the current airport land use. The current airport influence area. It's the thing that looks like, well, to me it looks like Green Lantern's lantern with a little hook on it, but I'm sure for those that aren't comic book nerds, I'm sure it looks like something, maybe a bow tie turned up on its side. And that covers the large part of the industrial portion of West Sacramento, as well as the northwest village of Southport and the Southport Business Park. And the proposed airport land use plan dramatically expands the airport influence area to that rectangle, largely a rectangular shape on the right side. You can't see at this level of detail, but it would include that rectangle. If those red lines extended through, would cover the entire city of West Sacramento, about a quarter of the city of Davis, a portion of the city of Woodland, and then all of the North Natomas portion of the city of Sacramento. So I want to make sure that I wanted to bring it here so that the council is fully aware and to make sure that our staff is giving this proposed change its full attention in terms of the review of the potential impacts. The airport influence area is a lesser standard, but it doesn't. It's not a strict regulatory framework for us, but does have implications. And so I wanted to make sure the council's aware, but also make sure that the city manager and the planning department are taking a good hard look at the implications of this while the period for public review on the plan is still pending, and to coordinate with the cities of Woodland and Davis and the county of Yolo, which obviously is significantly affected as well, to make sure that I think if the airport had its way, the entire state would be an airport influence area, but there are consequences to that, including that the projects that occur within this influence area have to conform to the airport land use plan, and whether that creates additional layers of review and what have you is something that we ought to be paying attention to. So I'm not bringing it here for any discussion, but simply to refer to make sure that the city manager and the planning department, if they're not already aware, are paying attention to this within what we have left as a 2-week window of the public comment period.
Mr. Mayor, if I may,
Yes, sir.
just chime in just a little bit. One of the issues that we've dealt with for a number of years, and that is the airport and their attempt to vector airplanes and air traffic over the city of West Sacramento. And that's an issue, and it always has been an issue, and I just wanted to make sure staff knew that there are many ways to ingress and egress out of the airport that really doesn't affect West Sacramento. And I think that the air traffic controllers and the people that run the airport, that should be a major issue for them. And so keep it as quiet as we possibly can. Keep the friendly skies friendly.
Mayor Pro Tem Ledesma?
I just had a request that if the comments, you are completed with them, or whatever approach we take with the comments, if you could forward on a copy to council members just so we can review that. I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, and your JPA might be particularly interested in this. One of the provisions of the airport influence area is that any land use change that might have the effect of concentrating wildlife in that location within the airport influence area is subject to this special review. Right, because what the airport would love to have happen is that this entire gigantic rectangle was entirely cleared of all birds, probably insects too, and then any animals that could reflect light off of them. So in addition to the issues around the city, the issues around the habitat work that the JPA is doing could be affected. And I'm really not trying to this could be entirely fine. But we need to make sure before we allow this to proceed in that way. So, all right, that's it on 1B. On 1C, so Madam Clerk, we have a vacancy on the Ag and Natural Resources Commission. I don't know when that occurred, but is that correct?
Yes, we have one, and we may have another one at some point.
Okay. All right. So are we in? Is recruitment open for that one?
Yes, yes.
Okay. All right, thank you then. But we have no appointments tonight. So the consent agenda is items 2 through 16. Are there any items on consent for a separate question or any item to remove?
$15.
And I had 9 and 13 in addition. So, not. Yeah. have Parlin Ranch, yes. It is item 7. Okay, so we'll pull item 7 from the consent agenda, and we'll take it up separately. All right, so on item 9, it's consideration of award of a contract for tree maintenance in the Bridgeway Lake CFD to West Coast Arborists. And the question I had, so we received just one bid. And what is that? What should that tell us about our?
Well, this is fairly consistent. Every time we go out to bid, last time we went out to bid, we got 2 responses: Fallen Leaf Tree Service and West Coast Arborists, and they went out of business. So now the only company that's doing municipal tree care regionally is West Coast Arborists. So that explains most of it.
And are their costs changing now that they're monopoly?
Their costs are coming down significantly, even with additional trees added to the contract. And we've added almost 3,000 trees to Bridgeway Lakes over the past couple of years, and their prices are going down.
Okay. So. All right, that's good to hear. Let's keep an eye on it. I mean, the point of doing the competitive bidding is to have a competitive environment where we can, over time, not have this situation occur. But if it's not a problem, yeah, that's great. But let's make sure we're monitoring how that's going. Thank you. Item 13 is consideration of funding applications for SACOG Regional Local Bicycle Pedestrian and Community Design Grant Programs. I don't have a question on this. I just think this is really the proposals that are here are exactly the right ones. These are good projects. I mean, they're all the critical priorities that the council's identified: the streetcar project, the Pioneer Bluff Bridge extension down Village Parkway to Stonegate, the Broadway Bridge, the first real cash in the game on the Broadway Bridge, and then the Sycamore Trail, Bright Park, and the Bike Boulevard proposal. They're great. They're all terrific, and we'll do our best to get all of them funded. A couple of them are partners would be partnerships with other agencies, including the City of Sacramento in a couple of cases, and RT and YCTD, right? In the case of the streetcar. And I know not all of that is locked down, so just for members of the council, particularly on the streetcar one, I think we need to be making sure we're fully engaging members of their council. I think our staff and their staff have done everything that they can do at the staff level to make sure that there's complete alignment and that we're entirely in sync. And we just have to do the same with our colleagues on the Sacramento City Council prior to the end of this month in order to make sure that these all move forward. This is no guarantee that these will all get funded. We would be extraordinarily lucky to get all 4 of these projects funded from SACOG, but it wouldn't be the first time that we have been extraordinarily lucky at SACOG. So it's worth a shot. But we do need the City of Sacramento in full partnership on all of them, and especially the streetcar project. All right, item 14 is consideration of Resolution 13-54, supporting the creation of a working group to study and advance the freight rail realignment in central and eastern Yolo County. Mr. Villegas?
Yeah, just a quick comment. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I know this is something we've talked about either conceptually or just generally over the years. Largely, it's not got any traction because of the overwhelming cost associated with it for West Sacramento, but I think now there appears to be at least initially some traction because of the potential, the upside for everybody. I mean, Davis, Woodland, West Sacramento, and Yolo, if you look at the list of potential value to working together, there is a huge upside. Although we didn't identify it necessarily as a huge city priority, I think a working group makes good sense right now to explore it and see whether or not there's a reason to continue, because the cost is huge, but certainly if you put all the players together looking at it, the potential for us, Yolo County, I mean, everybody, there's a huge upside to what can come if we were able to put this together. So it makes good sense. It's a good step forward.
I really appreciate the item. We just had the Yolo Mayor's quarterly meeting last week in Winters, and this was a high priority topic. And we all had different versions of what this project was. So seeing all the elements from all the jurisdictions in one staff report's really helpful. Is YCTD working on this? I mean,
yeah, that's good. Yeah. So that's I've been tracking it at that level because as the YCD, the Yolo County Transportation District rep, the conversation ensued a few months back, and there's value there as well. So there's other players that aren't even mentioned here necessarily that are certainly going to have an interest in tracking it as it moves forward. But yes, Terry, I think, was the one that I believe, Mr. City Manager, Terry Bassett probably contacted you at one point.
Well, Cindy Tuttle's here. Terry's aware of this project. I have not recently chatted with Terry, but he's certainly aware of it.
He's probably left you a voicemail at somewhere.
Okay.
Yeah. No, I think he was going to reach out, I think, because there is interest in the district as well to pursue it. Yeah.
We have a long-standing work to try to make sure YCTD sees itself as the countywide transportation planning agency and not just the YOLO bus operators.
That's right.
But they don't have a lot of capacity and experience in that domain. But this is the sort of project where if there was value to be had, that they should definitely be stepping up to help with the coordination and leadership. All right, item 15 is consideration of agreement with First Five YOLO for implementation of Child Signature Program 1 from First Five of California. Mr. Kristoff.
Yeah, Carol, on this one, are these existing monies or are these new Measure K funds?
The $100,000 that
Right.
we contribute to the program has been the ongoing contribution for several years.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so those are all the questions on the...
I just had a quick comment on that. Yeah, so I just want to follow up, and I know, thank you, Bill, because I know Bill certainly keeps this project, the whole initiative, honest in terms of our contribution, and it has been able to be funded through a series of different funding sources. And although the Measure K initial infusion over the course of the last few years we have leveraged that money 1,000 times over, and now the program in large part really is paying for itself with a series of different funding sources that are not coming from the city, but because of our initial infusion and the way that staff has miraculously been able to manage it and piece it all together, it's an amazing network of different funding sources and resources that have made this thing grow, and now we truly are, and I keep repeating this, but it's worthy of repeating, that our program here in West Sacramento really is a signature program, so it's a good product. That's fair enough?
Yep. All right, then we have the consent agenda minus item 7 before us. It's been moved by Mr. Villegas and seconded by Mr. Johannesson. Oh, he's playing blackjack with me. Mr. You second motions by tapping your finger.
2 tap.
All right, seeing no further discussion, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries. Item 7 is consideration of Resolution 13-50, accepting the majority of public improvement for Village 1D of the Parlin Ranch Southport Subdivision, final map number 4985. Is there a motion? It's been moved by Mr. Johannesson and seconded by Mr. Villegas. Mr. Ledesma has recused himself from this item. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries with 4 votes in favor and Mr. Ledesma abstaining.
Thank you.
That brings us to item 17, which is a public hearing and consideration of Resolution 13-39, certifying inclusion of delinquent charge and penalties for water, sewer, and refuse services on the secured tax roll in the same manner as the general taxes, and directing that a lien also be placed on the subject properties.
Good evening. My name is Claire Connor from Finance Division of the Administrative Services Department. Our division manages the financial part of the utility services. At the end of each fiscal year, we rely on this annual transfer of the delinquent amount to the property tax bill for collection. This process began in June by mailing a notice to all customers that have a delinquent May balance, and these notices encourage the property owners to pay or contact us for questions. The final step is to hold this public hearing to request council's approval of transferring these delinquent accounts to the property tax roll. As of tonight, the total delinquent amount has been further reduced to $909,000. We will continue accepting payments through July 30th, and the final list will be generated in early August. Staff in finance will make sure the final delinquent list submitted to the county is prepared in a most accurate manner. With that, I would like to return this item back to you for public hearing.
All right, thank you. Are there any questions of staff at this point? All right, thank you. Seeing none, we'll open the public hearing. I have no request to speak on this item, but because it is a statutory public hearing, does anyone wish to address the council on this item? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing on item 17. All right, it's been moved by Mr. Villegas and seconded by Mr. Johannesson. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Item 18 is a public hearing and consideration of Resolution 13-46, certifying the list of code enforcement charges, directing that a lien be placed on the subject properties, and requesting inclusion of these charges on the secured tax roll in order that they may be collected in the same manner as general taxes. Mr. Brooks?
Good evening, council members. Larry Brooks, Community Development Code Enforcement. What is before you is a list of code cases in which property owners may have eventually corrected the violations. However, they have failed to pay code enforcement fees associated with those violations. It is recommended that you open the public hearing, take testimony on any objections to these charges, after which we recommend you close the public hearing and adopt the attached Resolution 13-46 with the updated Exhibit A, which the city clerk provided, which includes one lien waiver request, and then we ask that you certify the list of code enforcement charges, directing that a lien be placed on subject properties, and request inclusion of these charges on the secured tax roll. Any questions?
All right, thank you. And we will open the public hearing on item 18. Again, I have no cards, but does anyone wish to address the council on this item? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Return to the council. Mr. Villegas moves and Mr. Johannesson seconds that this item 18 be approved. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Item carries. Item 19 is a public hearing and consideration of Resolution 13-45, certifying the list of weed abatement charges, directing that a lien be placed on the subject properties, and requesting inclusion of these charges on the secured tax roll in order that they may be collected in the same manner as general taxes. Mr. Johnson. Welcome.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members. Brian Johnson, Fire. As directed by Resolution 1320, which began the 2013 weed abatement program back in May, the fire department notified owners of properties which had a weed nuisance creating a fire hazard. I'm here tonight to close the 2013 weed abatement program. All properties requiring weed abatement by the city have been abated, and a list of the charges by parcel has been created, including a 20% special assessment for investigations, boundary determinations, clerical, and other costs. It is now respectfully recommended that the City Council open the public hearing to receive objections to the charges for mandatory weed abatement service initiated by the City, and also to adopt Resolution 1345, certifying the list of weed abatement charges, and directs the Yolo County Auditor to add the expenses to the individual tax rolls.
Are there questions? All right, seeing none, we're going to open the public hearing on item 19. Anyone wish to address the council on this item? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing and ask if there's a motion with the revised attachment 3. Moved by Mayor Pro Tem Ledesma, seconded by Mr. Kristoff. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Item 20. As a public hearing to consider City Council Resolution 13-52, authorizing the issuance of the Community Facilities District Numbers 8 and 9 Special Tax Refunding Bonds, Series 2013, and related actions, and Resolution 13-53 of the West Sacramento Financing Authority, authorizing the issuance of bonds in an amount not to exceed $39 million, approving the form of the official statement of distribution thereof, and approval of related actions. Mr. Blumberg?
Yeah, the item you have
your subject matter, your subject summary is a big fail. Half the words get repeated twice. You're intentionally just trying to trip me up. But welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, tonight's item deals with the refinancing of a couple special tax revenue bonds related to CFD 8, which is Southport Industrial Park, and then CFD 9, which is, it used to be Staples, now it's grocery outlet over at Harbor and 50. Anyway, there are two series of bonds that were issued in 1999 and 2001 that we would refund as proposed in the resolutions. We've been looking at this one for a few years, and it's you know, it's had some issues. First, CFD 8 had a foreclosure issue a while back, and that kind of prevented us from being able to refinance the bonds because, well, the 40% of the property was in foreclosure. That got resolved. New property owner, positive new development happening in Southport Industrial Park. But we had some issues with a couple of underwriters looking at it. We're concerned about value to lien ratios because, you have about 40% of the land that's undeveloped. And, finally we had Westhoff, Cone, and Homestead, another underwriter in our pool came up with an approach they think will be successful in selling these bonds. They've done an appraisal of the property that appears to address the concerns about value to lien. So our biggest concern right now is the continuing upward movement of municipal interest rates. And when we first looked at this deal in March, we had net present value savings. Late March, we had net present value savings of about 9.6% of the refunded bonds. And in your staff report, I think it says 4.1%. As of yesterday, we were, back up to 4.25%. So maybe the market's recovering a little bit, but, it's still in excess of the 3% net present value savings. That's, from a policy standpoint, a minimum of what we need to achieve for the refinancing. So we're recommending to proceed. We would try to close this deal, go to sale around July 24th and close August 7th. So, we're hoping that we'll realize the savings that we've outlined in your agenda report. The benefit of the transaction, the reason we're doing it is we would lower the debt service that needs to be paid, thus lowering special tax assessments on property owners in SIP and that single parcel CFD9. And savings would be about $189,000 annually, given what we think we're going to achieve here. But clearly the favorable interest rate environment that we've seen and has allowed us to do a flurry of refinancings over the last 2 years, that's likely coming to an end. We think that we'll maybe get one more deal done, and we've talked to you about the couple of issues of redevelopment bonds, and quite frankly, in the last 6 weeks, the deal that was looking really good is not in the money. But we're still going to continue on that one. We're hoping that, again, rates stabilize a bit and that we'll get that RDA refinancing done. And if the state of California, approves it as well, that's the other thing. But the actions that we're requesting in Resolution 1352 and 1353 will allow us to proceed with the project. And prior to your action tonight, we're just asking that the city and authority hold a public hearing, that the improvements to be financed with the bonds are of public benefit. And so we don't do this with all the refinancings, obviously, but the ones that involve community facility districts, special taxes, and special tax debt requires it. So with that closes the staff presentation. We can answer any questions you have.
Other questions for staff? All right, then we're going to open the public hearing. I have no cards. Does anyone wish to address the council on item 20? All right, seeing none, we're going to close the public hearing. So that concludes item 20. Concluded the public hearing. We'll move to item 21, which is the consideration of resolutions 13-52 and resolutions 13-53, improving the form of the official statement and distribution thereof and approval of related actions. Mr. Blumberg?
Yeah, having already given kind of the presentation on the report, we just ask that you approve staff recommendation.
Discussion or questions? Motion? So moved by Mr. Johannesson.
Second.
Seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Ledesma. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries. Thank you. Thanks to the team. All right, item 22 is consideration of budget for fiscal years 2013-14 and 2014-15. Mr. Wright, Mr. Tuttle.
And Mr. Mayor and council members, I wanted to again kind of commend our stellar finance staff. Paul Blumberg kind of mentioned a negative with the interest rates increasing, and his work and the consultant's work on doing the refinancing was really extraordinary and resulted in a lot of cost savings. While interest rates are going up, and Paul may see that as a negative, there are also very many positive things that are occurring in the economy. Tonight's presentation is a follow-up to the June 5th workshop on the 2-year budget. Staff has done a great job. Both Phil Wright, who's going to make the presentation, and Carol headed up the the team that put it together, several of the team members, including Chief Terrell, who was made his debut on the budget team, did a great job. But I just wanted to point out, in addition to the great work, there is a positive trend here, and I think you can look at it on page 1 in terms of the use of one-time revenue. In the major change from our workshop a month ago to today is that we are projecting a smaller amount of one-time money, rather than $400,000 in the second year of the 2-year budget to $200,000. And the big change there is the projection in sales tax. We're seeing sales tax go beyond our projection, and that is reflected in reducing the amount of this one-time money. So we are moving up. The other big change is an increase in costs, and we've talked about reducing ETO for staff, so that does increase our costs. But overall, things are positive, and I can't thank the staff enough for the work they've done in this. It's a very sound budget. We're not out of the woods yet, but the trend is going the right way. Bill?
Great. Thank you, Marty, and Mayor and Council. Try not to repeat some of the points that City Manager just made. Very quickly, the modifications since the workshop, excuse me, are that we now have the actual numbers for the employee concessions for all the unrepresented groups and for, excuse me, for the police management unit, and obviously we have fire and police MOUs that were already in place. We have more accurate numbers from 12-13, just tighten those up another month of numbers. So our numbers for 12-13 are slightly adjusted, about a $30,000 carryover more than we thought. We have the revised sales tax numbers, as Marty alluded to. We met with our sales consultant. We had another quarter of actual sales that came in, which allowed them to do a slight revision to our 13-14 numbers, and a larger revision to our projected 14-15. So that's very positive, as the city manager has pointed out. So that means we have, and as he also pointed out, based upon council direction, we have reduced ETO by 8 hours for all the unrepresented groups in each of the next 2 years. So that's a bit of an additional cost that is now included in the budget numbers. So the bottom line is we have slightly higher use of one-time money in the first fiscal year, mostly as it relates to the ETO, and then fairly significantly lower one-time money in the second year of the budget, mostly because of the sales tax positive. So looking at 12-13, just sort of to highlight where we're ending this year, property taxes appear to have stabilized, which is positive. We still have a lot of appeals, but they seem to have stabilized. And we're even beginning to think that we may see some increases in property taxes, as some other counties have seen coming up. Sales taxes clearly have been a very positive trend in the city, and when we met with the sales consultant, the nicest thing for the city of West Sac is our sales tax is spread out amongst just a whole variety of uses, from business to business to all sorts of industries, and our largest sales tax people are no more than about 6.5% to 7.5% of our total sales tax. So we're not beholden to any one company. We have lots of companies that contribute to our base. And so those seem to be on the rise, and obviously that's a good sign. Our expenses are under control. We came in under budget as we projected we would. So we've done a good job. We need to continue to monitor our expenses on a monthly basis. Thanks to all the department heads and Natish Sharma, our budget manager. They're meeting every month, so I want the council to be comfortable that we are doing monthly check-ins on our expenses, making sure that we're staying where we need to, and continue to look for efficiencies everywhere we can. The FTEs, the number of people we had, stayed absolutely flat. Again, the concessions were ongoing. Probably a reminder to all of us is that we did have to use $1.375 million to balance the budget this year. So it was not an operating budget that was balanced. There was a large use of one-time money. That one-time money is being significantly reduced, which is the positive, but we still have an operating deficit, as the council has made clear to staff, and we continue to work on those things. Very positive. We didn't touch our reserves. They remain at 17%, $7.1 million. We've maintained those levels. So that's basically how we ended the year. Pretty much very close to how we budgeted. We have $80,000 in carryover, so that's pretty good budgeting on On a $40 million general fund, we were off by $80,000. But it was thanks to the work of all the departments and all of our employees that we were able to do that. So the next 2-year budget that you have before you is balanced. As I indicated, we still have an operating deficit of about $500,000 and $200,000. We've made some adjustments to reduce the use of one-time money. This includes the 2% sales tax increase, which is very conservative. 1.8% property tax, again, very conservative based upon our numbers. There's a very small increase in the FTEs, mostly in the early learning program, which are grant and fee funded, so that's no additional cost there. This budget accomplishes one of the council's goals of the employee benefit restructuring continuing at the end of this 2-year budget. Every single employee in the city will be paying 100% of their employee portion of PERS, except for Local 39, because we only have a contract that's going to go till the middle, and we will then negotiate the rest in the second contract. So that's a very, very positive, and the employee groups have been very receptive to that idea and worked well with staff. This budget will maintain the reserves at 17%, so there's no touching of the reserves. It continues 3 police officers that were funded with a COPS grant, now being funded by the general fund, so we're maintaining the staffing level. It maintains the concessions at between 4% and 5% for all employees. That's not necessarily a positive, but I want to throw it out as it's important to recognize the employees understand that we have an operating deficit and they're being part of the solution to the problem. And that is appreciated, obviously, I know by the council and certainly by staff, the management team. Just touching, this budget also includes fully funding the ARC, the unfunded liability. So the city, ever since GASB 45, when we've been required to report it and required to have a plan, we have a plan, and we have complied with making a full payment every year. So we are dealing with the unfunded liability. It's still significant. We have a long way to go before we've solved that problem, but we continue to move in the right direction. A couple other funds that I just think are important to note. CDD, Community Development, as you know, in the past, we've had to give them a subsidy of $250,000 in the last 4 years because of the challenges with the economy. This budget includes no additional subsidy. There's a subsidy pursuant to our policies of up to 15%, because community development does a lot of work for the city, not for outside people, but for the city itself. But CDD is doing extremely well, and so there's no subsidy. There's also no subsidy for public works engineering, which there's been for the last 4 years. So those are very positive changes, and in fact, CDD is paying a little bit back to the general fund for the money that we essentially fronted them. Not large amounts, but it's a beginning of a positive trend. And then finally, as the council is well aware, with the recent changes in port, we've really appear to have solidified that drain on the general fund, and the port budget is balanced and without any money from the city, so that's a really positive thing. Again, I think, as the city manager has indicated, lots of positive trends, but not to be forgotten that we're still using one-time money. We still have employee concessions. We still have to be very, very efficient for the next 2 years to look for other ways, because as I've discussed with council before, we still have PERS increases that are going to be coming in 2 years, lasting for 5 years. So there's a lot of positive trends, and thanks to the guidance from council and obviously the work of staff, we're presenting a balanced budget that we request you adopt tonight. With that, Mr. Sharma, our budget manager, and I would be more than glad to ask any detailed questions that you may have.
Well, I want to say sales taxes. We asked last time about the composition of the sales tax and whether the switch to online sales tax is being collected in California, whether that had some impact on a spike in growth, and also the relationship of that online sales tax collection to Measure K, if there is one.
And we did immediately, actually, the next day, we had a telephone conversation with our sales consultant, and they have taken that into consideration in the numbers. So they have no concern that there's a spike in the number. We still get
The Measure K portion will be increasing because Measure K follows where goods are delivered. So if somebody is buying from an online retailer, it's in town, the goods will be delivered here. So we get that district portion of the tax. So we do get the district portion. It's just that 1%, this general fund we won't get, and we haven't counted in that one.
It has been accounted for in their projections. So they were aware of their concern, and they take that into account when that's part of why the projection is 1.8, not higher, actually.
Vegas.
Thank you, Phil. Good presentation. I think you've done an amazing job. Everybody has in terms of just trying to manage this thing because it's been such a difficult thing the last couple of years. So the conservative 1.8% projections for the property taxes. So I mean, obviously we didn't see the downside of property taxes until 8, 9, almost 10 it seemed like. So consequently the converse is that we won't see the upside, even though the projections might come in, or it appears that they might be better than the conservative estimates of 1.8. Is that what you said?
2% on property, 1.8%.
Roughly 2% on property, right. So we won't see those receipts for a while. When will you get some indication of the trend, and not just 1 quarter or 2 quarters, but an actual trend to see whether or not our projections are in fact conservative relative to what we should anticipate?
Well, one of the items we intend to work on for the next couple of years, actually on an ongoing basis, working on it now, is preparing a quarterly report that we're going to bring to council on the budget. We want a quarterly report to you, not once a year or once every 2 years with a budget. And so our intent is to talk to the Yolo County auditor controller before that report and have quarterly reports and see where we are. We talked to the county. They actually talked that they may increase some of the property taxes. They could do a Prop 8 upwards. The reason they recommended not going above 2% is they still have the outstanding appeal. So they're actually projecting an increase above 2%, but they think there's going to be a down drag because of the appeals that are going in. So that's where we got the 2% from.
That makes sense. Yeah.
But we'll report on a quarterly basis as to where we are in sales tax, where we are in property tax.
Can I just follow up?
Go ahead,
Can you report when you report those? Can you report them based upon and include the projections in those reports? Because I think it's helpful to understand, in terms of the budget, what the projected amounts were versus the actuals 6, 8, 10, 12, or 24 months later. It's helpful to get some perspective in terms of how we budgeted, at least for my own edification.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thanks.
Absolutely.
And I think that's one thing I wanted to I think you're going where I'm going, is just wanting to see that what we had planned versus the actual, and being able to see that, I think that'd be helpful. And if I can keep on, thank you. I just jumped in. I'm sorry. So just to go back, clarify a question that Mr. Villegas brought up, which is around property taxes. I just want to make sure I'm clear. So is the county saying that the property taxes, that the actual backlog of appeals is actually dragging down? Okay, I just want to make sure. So it's 2%. It'd be higher without all those appeals.
Correct.
Kind of sitting there.
What they said was it's going to be higher than 2%, but we're not comfortable recommending that you put more than 2% in your budget because of these appeals that you have. And we don't know what the results are going to be. You know, those appeals some of them just get withdrawn, most of them get settled, but they were uncomfortable with giving us anything more than 2%.
Well, and I think it's the right thing to do, given kind of the history of the last 6 years, to be more conservative than not. What was especially great to hear was the sales tax projections, and excuse my voice, but I know
it really means a lot to you.
He's a banker. He gets that way when you talk about money.
Yes, no, allergies. But just to hear in our portfolio of businesses that are being able to drive sales tax revenue pretty even keel, so that we're like, to your point, we're not dependent on any one given industry in our town driving the sales taxes, and that's just great news, and about how our strategies and on our economic development strategies. It's just that to me was sort of what I read into this, like that is a real big feather in a cap. So thank you, all of you. The one thing I did want to say, and I should have started with this, was thank you for the presentation and really for the diligence on this budgeting process. I've been talking with you for the last year. You've held a position, and just the work all of you do, and not just in presenting the information to us. And no, I think there's probably more questions coming, but on your diligence on the monthly, your monthly check-ins with staff, making sure that we're kind of living within our means here at City Hall. I know that's a hard culture, but it's the one that we have to live with going forward. And as hopefully as you know, again, when the 2-year cycle comes up, and we're able to get to a point where our sales tax is even greater, our property taxes are back. You know, we could look for opportunities for other new services or expanding services, whatever we need to do. But we're not there yet, and it's just nice to know that there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and we're starting to see it. So this was a great presentation and report on the budget, and certainly appreciate the reduction in the one-time monies to balance the budget that we had to use. I think that was kind of again underscores the need that we're not out of the woods yet. We still have this operating deficit, and we'd like to see that go away. So anyway, those are my only comments. Thank you.
Mr. Kristoff.
Very quickly, first, Phil, I'd like to thank you and your staff for presentation, for the way you presented this whole budget process and everything else. And one question I do have, though, is when we pay our property taxes on April 10th and December 10th, when does that money come to us? Does that come in June?
It comes
January.
50% comes in January, 45% in May, and then 5% in August the following year.
And so the August, if it's 5% of it in August, that could be inflated because a lot of the appeals and a lot of the things will be taken care of, hopefully.
Actually, it happens. It's the 5% is based on secured roll, so we actually know what the 5% amount is. The county makes adjustment usually in the first or second distribution. In the 5%, it's more of a cleanup, and it's usually a small amount.
Well, because West Sacramento, like many other communities, I mean, I see the price of homes in West Sacramento now has gone up remarkably. It's that since it's gone up, the housing market really has sort of, want to say, rebounded somewhat. I mean, I'm not willing to go all the way, but I mean, it's just rebounded somewhat. Or there are good trends, I'll put it that way, because the price of housing is pretty expensive out there now, or at least it's getting to that point again. Is that reflected in the January, February, or the report, I mean, monies back from the Yolo County?
Yes, when we get our first distribution in January, we actually get a new base amount, and that's how we compare to see if there's any trend of increase. So we will know that in January.
Okay, thank you.
Really, based upon what Natish said, to go back to Councilman Villegas' question, it'll probably be that a February or March report where we'll really be able to give you an idea of comparing what we had in the budget versus what we actually get.
Mr. Johannesson.
I again, thank you for the presentation. I think it looks good. We're living within our means. I just had a quick question on the rec center. I know it looks like we're buying another piece of equipment. There's $67,000 worth of cardio equipment. Is a rec center accounted for like an enterprise, or how is that?
It's part of the general fund. It's reported as general fund. Rec center brings in about 60% of the revenue, and the rest is general fund.
So it's basically subsidized by 40%?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And that's a replacement equipment, so it's not new equipment. This is simply equipment that all of the supplemental equipment requests are replacement equipment for things that we have deferred beyond where we really probably should have, and we feel we really have to replace those equipments now. So that's the same with the rec center.
But in terms of like the operation of the rec center, do we account for that as exactly what what does that operation do? I don't know if I've ever seen it.
I know Parks and Rec.
Fees, you know, that kind of,
Yes.
we'll treat it more like an enterprise, just to kind of get an idea of what we're doing.
I think, as Mitch just said, it's about a 60% enterprise, which is not really an enterprise. We're subsidizing the rec center at this point.
Any further questions or discussion? All right, then a motion is in order. Moved by Mr. Villegas, seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Ledesma. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Thanks to the whole team. Item 23 is consideration of biennial capital improvement budget and 5-year capital improvement plan.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Nitesh Sharma with City Finance. The proposed capital improvement budget was presented to you on June 5th. Per council direction, we have included in your packet a comprehensive 5-year capital improvement plan, which is first 2 years budget and the 3-year plan, and that is as attachment 2 and 3. It's basically same report, but the attachment 2 is by fund and 3 is by category. Since the workshop, we just added one new project, and that is actually was discussed a little earlier today. That's the Village Parkway extension from the Pioneer Bluff Bridge to Stonegate. And the funding for that, the allocation of $900,000 is for design, and which we're hoping that we could use that as a local fund to get hopefully these community design funding for the construction. When we will bring this project to council, we will identify the funding source. As of right now, we actually haven't identified how we are paying for it, although we are budgeting in traffic improvement fund. However, staff will recommend in future when we bring this project to use the Measure G fund, Fund 106, the post-RDA RPTTF fund for this project. Mr. Aaron Laurel is here if you have any questions about the funding of this project. So with this, complete staff's presentation, and I will be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Other questions for staff? Any discussion? Mr. Johannesson.
So on this, the Pioneer Bluff to Bridge to Stonegate, it's budgeted for $900,000. So that's basically what the cost is going to be to connect the bridge with the rest of Southport.
It's up to the Stonegate, yes.
Through
that point. That would not include the construction cost.
Yeah.
It's actually much higher to do the full build. It's about $5.5 million to do with sidewalks and everything. That's what we're applying for community design. So the $900,000 would be our matching source for that grant application. The alternative scenario is if we don't get the grant, we may look at doing a kind of a scaled back version of the project to just do the roadway in the interim period, and we're working on a cost estimate for that. But the $900,000 would be the initial both match for the grant and also the initial amount to do the next phase of design work.
So the timing would be the same, the 2014, 2015 time frame?
That's what we're hoping for.
That's what we're hoping for. Yeah. All right, thanks.
You could end up with a park and ride and then a bike lane to extend it all the way south if you needed to. I'm kidding. Yeah, we're going to need that funding, that's for sure.
Further discussion? Then a motion would be in order. Second. It's been moved by Mr. Johannesson and seconded by Mr. Christoph. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Not a lot of discussion, but we took the topic up at the last meeting. So also great work. These are key projects to advance, and it's good. It's a lot of improvements in infrastructure work that was severely threatened by the loss of redevelopment, which through a variety of measures and grant opportunities and Fund 106 and everything else that the staff and the community in their adoption of Measure G have set the table for. So it's a very positive step. Item 24 is consideration of a presentation and discussion of Ordinance 13-2, repealing and adding Chapter 13.09 of the City of West Sacramento Municipal Code relating to wastewater discharge. Mr. Rosenthal.
Good evening, Mayor, council members.
Paulina Rosenthal, Environmental Services Manager. The item before you this evening is to present and discuss and to receive comment or feedback from council on the proposed changes to Municipal Code Section 13.09 relating to wastewater discharges. As council is well aware, the city became a contributing agency to Sacramento Regional County's Sanitation District in 2007 and subsequently decommissioned our wastewater treatment plant. Since that time, waste discharge requirements have been implemented by the state on municipal agencies, which require, among other things, that municipal agencies such as SRCSD, who operate a treatment facility, adopt coordinating agreements with their contributing agencies. The SRCSD has adopted a proposed operating agreement to have with each of their contributing agencies, such as Sacramento Sanitation District, cities of Folsom and Sacramento, and of course the city of West Sacramento. The proposed agreement requires that the council, or I'm sorry, excuse me, that each of the contributing agencies' municipal code be amended to include reference to SRCSD's consolidated ordinance. And upon review of the city's municipal code, it was determined that significant changes were needed to, one, bring our code up to date post our wastewater treatment plant closure, and to add the reference to SRCSD's authority. Based on the numerous changes, it was recommended that the code chapter be repealed and replaced in its entirety. While many of the changes needed to bring the code chapter up to date are of housekeeping nature, there are a few significant changes, such as removing all of the various sections related to our wastewater treatment permits that we used to issue. Since we no longer have a wastewater treatment facility, we no longer issue those permits, nor do we have a pretreatment program, both of which are now under SRCSD's authority. We also added the reference to SRCSD's authority in issuing wastewater discharge permits and modified the enforcement section to recognize SRCSD authority and maintain our authority to monitor and enforce discharges to our city-operated and owned collection system. And with that, I'll take any questions from the council.
Questions?
Nope, it's still one of the best decisions I've made on this council was to get out of this business and to join the larger treatment plant, as crazy as it sounds some days. And so this makes perfectly good sense.
And I appreciate both the red line version of the ordinance and also the track changes version, so I can follow your debates with the internal staff debates between each other.
My apologies for that formatting error.
No, it was great.
Yeah. It did give us some context.
That's right. Yeah, maybe want to read it more to see if it got nasty, and it never did.
Okay. Thank you.
And any further discussion on item 24? Then is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Villegas and seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Ledesma. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Item 25 is an update on General Plan 2035.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. We're pleased to be here tonight before you because we are re-engaging our efforts to complete our general plan update that has been a long saga for the last several years.
It's time for another one.
To say the least. Most notably is that we are now looking to 2035, where previously we were looking at 2030. As the council may recall, and through our efforts previously before we've had to take a break on general plan update, we did make a substantial amount of progress, and our goal is to pick up from where we left off as much as possible and continue to move forward and get the general plan done once and for all. Previously, we did complete the issues and opportunities report, the update of the existing general plan background report, and also the alternatives analysis. And those were brought through numerous stakeholder meetings, through the Planning Commission, other city commissions, and also before the council. We also had some policy considerations before the council, as you may recall, such as level of service and annexation. And so where we've left off, we still have some substantial work to complete, but we are certainly well on our way. Our next mission before the council coming up in the next couple of months is we'll want to bring forward to you some updates to the preferred land use scenario It's been about a little over 3 years since the council saw that map, so we've had to make some updates to that as it pertains to our levy improvement program, and with some other factors consideration. That map won't look substantially different than what you've seen previously, but we do want to re-engage the council on that, as well as the associated build-out figures. This is an important step at this stage because that becomes a lot of the foundation for what becomes studied ultimately in the general plan EIR. We will be looking for some consultant assistance on helping prepare that EIR, and so we'll be referring forth a contract for you in the next couple of months as well. And in the meantime, we will continue to work on updating the policy document from what was completed before. We have to deal with the dissolution of redevelopment, since that is a big change that occurred since we last were working on the policy document in earnest. We want to make sure we have the complete streets policies in there, and also address the various pieces of flood-related legislation that has been passed, that including the 200-year maps from DWR that were presented to the council at the last meeting. That information needs to be included in there. And of course, we also want to make sure that we have the information in their policy document adequately to follow how the SACOG Airport Land Use Master Plan update process is occurring. So that is, and up here in the slide, sort of a summary of our next major steps coming before the council, and some stop before the Planning Commission on the way to council. So that's really an update on where we are and where we're going here in the short term. Our goal is still to finish the general plan sometime, next year. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Questions?
I
Discussion?
do.
Mr. Christoph.
Dave, on the, with the flood component of this, we are getting ready to hear the GRR sometime in 2014. So the question I have is, if we can move quickly on that, how will the general plan address reaches F and B, and if we get those resolved?
Well, from a land use standpoint, we've attempted to, on the land use map, we've attempted to accommodate the levee footprint for what those improvements, will be, and to try to also, assess just how much otherwise was previously thought to be developable land would be considered in there, and this, how many, how much build out would otherwise not be there. So now that we're at 65%, we feel fairly confident on a general plan level that from a mapping standpoint we can accommodate that.
But there are some property owners that are objecting, and how do they get treated from a general plan perspective? Because it seems like the footprint of their property, if West Sac-SAFCA moves forward, is going to be reduced.
Well, to the extent their property is outside of the future levy footprint, we aren't proposing to change any of that zoning or from that standpoint. But to the extent to where within that levy footprint, we are trying to have that reflected in the general plan and the associated build-out figures.
Okay.
And that will be what's probably most readily visible when we bring the general plan land use map back before you, is particularly in Southport, the footprint of the new levy system compared to what we have now is fairly substantial.
Yeah, because, I really don't want to jump the gun because the GRR's not done, and we actually haven't started any construction. We're still in the phase, the 65 to 95% phase, and so I didn't want to really jump the gun and make some changes or anything, but at the same time, something's going to happen.
And that's partially why we have waited somewhat to at least let the levy program at least get to 65%. That was some of the silver lining in having to stop work on a general plan for budget reasons. That it did allow the levy improvement program to progress so that it's become a little more defined. We would not have been comfortable proceeding if they were still at the kind of 15% level like they were a few months back.
Right.
So.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments?
If I can.
Mayor Pro Tem Ledesma?
Thank you. So it sounds like you're, you know, the next step coming back with the preferred land use map, build-out figures, you are taking into consideration, obviously, the projects, flood and bridge and Village Parkway, all the things that have changed since we kind of left off.
Yeah, that's principally why we want to bring it back, is that there has been some changes since last time that, at least to us, warrant another, view by the council and hope we'd be seeking your direction to include that as the basis for the general plan, EIR analysis.
Yeah, and I just wanted to make sure that there was going into that, I'm just thinking of, other areas of Southport that didn't come to fruition that we anticipated 5-6 years ago, and those types of issues that have come up.
Yeah, that's partially why we're revisiting some of those build-out figures. We calced them a few years ago in a much different time and place, and even though we were somewhat, conservative at that time and maybe even somewhat pessimistic at some point, we're certainly more optimistic than we are now, but we also recognize that much of the new growth in the plan was focused in what was the redevelopment area, and we don't want to underestimate what it means to not have that tool anymore and to be able to advance some of our redevelopment efforts that we have long since planned, but doesn't mean we aren't still going to accommodate a lot of growth in our infill and refill areas like Pioneer Bluff and West Capitol, but that's be part of our discussion is to should we be targeting and assuming and planning for, particularly in those areas now in 2013 and looking forward.
And that's what we'll have an opportunity to comment on and add input on in the October and September meeting. And it's just, going back to how important getting those build-out figures are, just as I'm learning that's the part of the conservation plan that we're working on the other side, is that they're critical in estimating, getting those down. Because I think on the Habitat NCCP plan, and Charlene will nod at me if I'm wrong or right, but those are going to count on those numbers and the acres that we build out.
And part of what we're also now definitely focusing on is when we're looking at these build-out numbers and we get into the EIR, we want to also be looking at these from an economic lens, particularly as it pertains to a certain amount of growth translates into a certain amount of infrastructure, that will need to be delivered to accommodate that growth. We want to have an understanding of what that infrastructure burden really will mean from an economic standpoint, so that we are delivering a general plan that we will be able to implement over the next 20 years or so, with the environment that we will be in and what our resources are anticipated to be. That create an additional emphasis on trying to make sure our build-out figures are reasonable, and we don't overshoot, but we also don't undershoot where we're going.
I guess what I'm saying is that we have, from that perspective on how we approach the conservation strategy, it really is not in our interest to overshoot on that, because we'll have to figure in conservation strategies around this.
Yeah, on the conservation plan, that's really more about our footprint, and the footprint that they've assumed in that is pretty much our city limit line. And so it's not so much about density as it is about acres that we're going to disturb. And so there might be some slight adjustment based on the levee footprint, because the Southport project looks like it might be doing some self-mitigation. And so that's what we want to look at, is those areas where we don't think we're going to have development that disturbs habitat compared to our city limit line, and see whether we can adjust that downward. But the build-out figures he's referring to has more to do with density, how dense we build within that footprint.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
And then just to build on his other comment about economic development, this will be a little bit different than how we've approached general plans in the past. We're going to try to put the economics a little more forward, so that we're not creating a general plan 2035 that's going to require infrastructure that we can't afford to build. So we're going to try to put a little bit more of the economics forward for you.
All right.
Further? All right, this item is not for action. It's just presentation and direction. It's sufficient. The director has indicated she has sufficient direction, so thank you.
You.
All right, then we'll proceed to item 26, which is presentation of the 2011 greenhouse gas emissions inventory update and proposed climate action plan revisions.
Good evening again, Mayor and council members. The presentation of the 2011 municipal and citywide greenhouse gas emissions inventory update and related revisions to Chapter 2 of the Climate Action Plan will be presented by the city's consultant, Ascent Environmental, as they did the update and revisions for us. Without further ado, I'd like to welcome and introduce Heather Phillips with Ascent Environmental. Of course, I'll be around and available if there's any questions for city staff. Thanks.
Thank you, Paulina. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. My name is Heather Phillips. I'm a senior air quality and climate change specialist with Ascent Environmental and Ascent's project manager for the greenhouse gas emissions inventory contract. The city initially prepared a greenhouse gas emissions inventory and draft climate action plan in 2010 that reflected activities from 2007. However, greenhouse gas emission estimation methods have evolved since that time, and some physical conditions within the community have also changed. This made it advisable to update the greenhouse gas emissions inventory to reflect best practices and best available information. So Ascent has conducted that update to the emissions inventory for the community and for municipal operations based on data from 2011. This information will be useful for the general plan update as background information that we just heard about. Greenhouse gas emissions are estimated based on activity data, which includes data like vehicle miles traveled in the community, kilowatt hours of electricity consumed by customers within the community, and so on. And Paulina and her team were instrumental in collecting that activity data, so we were very grateful for that and really enjoyed working with them. SACOG staff also provided support to this effort. So without further ado, I'll get into the results. On the next slide, please. This chart shows the contribution to total community-wide emissions by sector, and which will probably come as no surprise. Transportation and energy are the dominant emission sectors within West Sacramento. 335,000 metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent might not be a very meaningful figure on its own, but this next slide puts West Sacramento's emissions in context with some of the surrounding jurisdictions. And West Sacramento is there in green on the right-hand side of your screen.
Are we the greenest city in Yolo County?
Next slide, please. This next chart is showing emissions from municipal operations, which are fairly evenly distributed among the sectors that you see here. Municipal operations emissions are a subset of the community-wide inventory that you saw on the earlier slide. One more slide, please. Ascent conducted greenhouse gas emissions forecasts for future years 2020 and 2035, and those benchmark years are important with respect to AB 32 climate change goals for the state, and as well as the general plan planning horizon year. The blue line shows the emissions trajectory of growth based solely on demographic growth projections from SACOG, and we call this the business as usual scenario. But if we layer the effects of legislation that is expected to lower emissions over time on top of the business as usual scenario, we get the orange line, which takes into account the various efforts at the state level that will reduce emissions. And those are pieces of legislation that are already in place and underway, such as vehicle emission standards that affect the fleet of vehicles sold in California, renewable electricity portfolio standards that apply to PG&E, Title 24 Building Energy Efficiency Code that will affect new development. And so what we're seeing is significant reductions that are expected from legislation, but however, there's still an important role for local government to play, especially on the longer term planning horizon where we see this trajectory start to curve back upward. In order to be consistent with the legislation and executive orders on the subject of climate change, we would want to see that curve start to trend downward. And so that's where local government climate action can come in. So to wrap up, our recommendation is to establish the baseline for the greenhouse gas emissions inventory at 2011 based on the most current available information, and that will be the year against which future progress can be measured. This information has been incorporated into Chapter 2 of the Draft Climate Action Plan, which is an attachment to your agenda materials tonight. And thank you very much for your attention, and I would be happy to answer any questions on the data that we have talked about tonight, if any.
Mr. Johannesson.
Yeah, thank you for your presentation. Now, on the vehicles mile traveled, do you distinguish between technology being used, for example, if everybody drove electric cars, same vehicles mile traveled versus, diesel or whatever?
That's a good question. Under the business as usual scenario, the California Air Resources Board has a tool called the Mobile Source Emission Factor Model that accounts for sort of the current vehicle fleet as it exists today, and it is expected to exist and planned for into the future. And so the scenario where everyone drives an electric car is not accounted for at all at this time. But as additional legislation comes forward, advanced clean cars directives and so on, those types of vehicles will become factored into the fleet mix and will affect the emission factor that accompanies the vehicle miles traveled.
Okay, so that's all right. And then the other question is, when you're looking at vehicles mile traveled, I think we covered this before, you're not really considering the freeways.
Great question. This methodology that we've used to characterize emissions from vehicles in this work follows the recommendations of the SB 375 Regional Targets Advisory Committee, which is a standard methodology that's requested to apply to all communities with sustainable community strategies in the state, that provides a discount for trips that originate and terminate within the city, and then deletes or omits all pass-through trips from a community. So trips that do not originate or terminate within city limits don't get counted.
All right, thanks.
Right.
This is good work, but the two areas that I would change are the two targets. Right? These are the targets that you've outlined in the Chapter 2 draft are fine if we were a generic city that didn't have a central interest in the outcome here. I mean, if we're just trying to meet our regulatory obligations. But West Sacramento is especially affected by the impact of the greenhouse gas emissions and climate change in both water supply, to the extent to which the snowpack issues in particular affect our ability to access water when we need it and to prevent major flooding, that unlike some other cities in California, the impact on us could be severe. In addition to the impacts in terms of the sea level rise on the Delta and the potential for the salination of the Delta region, there are major impacts on West Sacramento, and so simply doing what might be acceptable from an ARB perspective, I think, is not good enough for our city. And when we began this effort, we said we want, it's part of our strategic plan value of being a leader in this domain, not simply if everyone does what we've described here, we will not solve the problem, and our basic existence and public safety will be severely threatened. And so I think we can do more, both on the community-wide number. I mean, I don't mean radically more, but I mean you've given us two options, and I think the 30% reduction below business as usual is an achievable target. I mean, heck, 20% of us drive all electric vehicles, and these are changes. And the land use plans that we've done, the investments that we're making in the streetcar. I mean, we are doing aggressive actions in policy and infrastructure that support a more aggressive target on a community-wide basis. And certainly, as a city, we can't even be setting a 20% target for the community and only a 10% target for ourselves. I mean, we should and can lead more by example. I mean, we are good at this. We've done a good job over the last several years. There's a lot more that we could and can be doing, and a lot more of the legislative and technological solutions that aren't painful to us. We just need to do more of them. I mean, the electric vehicle pieces or other sources, hydrogen fuel cells, whatever. They're all, we don't make great use of those as a city government yet. So there's a lot over the planning period of this analysis. There's a lot more that we could be doing that would, I think, you said we could go to 15% pretty easily, and I think that's true, and we ought to. I mean, we ought to be playing not a crazy. I don't want to get crazy because there are cost implications to that too. And we can always go further than our goal, but I think we should be setting a somewhat more. We should set the more aggressive goal of the options that you've given us in both of these situations. So I would prefer option 1 to option 2, and then on the municipal side, I think you indicated 15% was another alternative to the 10% target that was in Table 212.
Thank you for reviewing that information, and that's very helpful direction, especially as staff embarks on the next steps of working through the details of the Climate Action Plan and coming up with the menu of greenhouse gas reduction strategies that will start to show how those targets will be met.
All right. Because tonight, you're not asking us tonight to adopt the goals or to put them in the general plan at this stage, but simply to adopt this data set so that you can then prepare these goals. So.
That is correct, and as Heather mentioned, we will take your comments into consideration when we do finalize the Climate Action Plan. At this point,
and bring it to us.
Correct,
right.
Of course.
I guess my comment would be, we sort of need to tread, I'd like to follow the mayor and say, okay, hey, fine, let's make these goals stricter, but I want to make sure that they are achievable. I'd like to make sure that they're not something that comes back to bite us in the backside, so to speak, from either a financial perspective or some other kind of perspective that, in essence, sort of harms our development or our growth or whatever. I'm hoping that we can meet the more stringent goals nice and easily, but I just want to make sure that we proceed cautiously. Those would be the comments that I have. Would not be as aggressive as the mayor, but at the same time,
stretch but don't snap. Stretch goals but don't snap. Right.
Okay. I agree.
All right. Any further discussion? Questions? Mr. Villegas?
Just a quick comment. I didn't see it in the presentation this evening, but I think when we come back, in terms of how we make sure that folks know what our targets are, it's only really as good as how much we're advertising and letting the schools know, the residents know. Our community needs to understand what we're trying to do collectively, and so without making sure that the word gets out and that people are aware of what the targeted goals are, I think people will actively participate and get involved, but we need to make sure they're aware of it.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. You have sufficient direction then to use the data. All right. Very good. Thank you. That brings us to council calendar. Ms. Richardson.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Tomorrow at 4 p.m. we're at the port. There's going to be the ribbon cutting for the Fire Marine Training Tower, and it'll be an appreciation ceremony thanking Yocho Dihi, Wintu Nation for their $30,000 contribution. So that's going to take place tomorrow at 4 o'clock at the port. Coming up in August is the National Night Out on August 6th, and you'll be receiving a list of locations where there'll be host events from the police department. Earlier it was mentioned that the West Capitol Courtyards project was going to be doing its groundbreaking. We are looking at August 8th at 11 or 11:30. I think we're going to be leaning towards 11:30 for that groundbreaking if that meets with the council members' schedules. So we'll be contacting you individually to see how that works for you.
That's West Capitol Commons.
What did I say? Courtyard? I'm
yes,
sorry.
If you live
Commons,
at West Capitol
yeah.
Courtyard, don't worry, we're not
coming. Yeah, I know. We already did that one.
On your
Sorry.
apartment.
Thank you.
All right. Any questions on the calendar? City manager report.
Just briefly, last week we had a change of command for our police department. Councilmember Christoph the following day attended with staff a change of command for the Army Corps of Engineers Sacramento District. Colonel Farrell is the new commander there. We sent a brief letter to him reiterating our priorities, both in flood protection and O&M dredging for the port. So he seemed very receptive to that in the conversations with him, and he plans a visit to the city sometime in early fall. Then I also want to give you the heads up. The mayor mentioned Blueprint was over. A few weeks ago, I was asked to participate in a taping of a TV show that would be coming on Friday night. So if you see me on TV on Studio Sacramento, you've been warned. So.
Emmy-winning Studio Sacramento.
Yes.
Okay. Any questions on the city manager report? And the city manager report, we did meet yesterday with the governor's office about the infrastructure financing districts and redevelopment as well. And can you briefly just address the sports camp issue?
Carol, to do that, because Carol's been on point with Andre on the issue.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, we had a couple of unfortunate incidents at our sports camp this last week, one involving an employee from the school district and then one involving one of our employees. As soon as we found out about each one of these incidents, we contacted the school district and informed them of what we knew, and they're conducting their own investigation and are following through on that. Relative to our situations, some of the employees who were involved in the incident have been removed and are no longer working in the program. We're continuing to respond to parent concerns and reviewing our training and supervision practices at the sports camp and throughout the recreation center. I'd be happy to answer any other questions if you like.
No, thank you. I think what it's important to note that the city's taking this very seriously and investigating and responding in every way that is possible and appropriate, and also trying to be as transparent as possible about it. So we appreciate the report and the written communications and other communications that have been occurring with some of the parents as well around the issue. Okay, city attorney report. Staff direction for members of the council. And we have no future agenda item requests. Is there a motion to adjourn?
No, we're going to go to exec.
Oh, sorry. Yes, we were going to recess. We have one additional item in closed session. So council stands in recess.